Well, welcome to Round the Table Live with Critical Concern, first one of 2023. It's great to be back. And today we are discussing the promotion of extreme transgender ideology to young children in a Church of England primary school. And I'm delighted today to be able to welcome Calvin Watts, parent of pupils in a Church of England school, who has very bravely and courageously with great conviction, raised the concern and raised the profile of this issue in Church of England schools. Thank you so much for joining us, Calvin. And we also delighted to have Roger Kiska, legal eagle from our legal team, who is able to provide a very helpful legal perspective on all this. Welcome to Roger. So, Calvin, let's go straight to you, if that's all right. Tell us what actually happened. What prompted you to end up raising a complaint to the school that your children were in?
So the school has basically shown a video to our children, teaching them that they can be that they're born in the wrong body.
Step back a minute, Calvin. How old are your children, and what kind of school is it?
So it's St Michael's School in near Tenston, Kent, and this is year 4, so 8-year-olds.
Right.
And
it's a Church of England school.
That's it, yeah. So we sent our children to that school because we thought there'd be some level of protection. And every September, when the children get new teachers, etc., we write to the school and we say, look, we're Christian parents. We want our children to be protected from a lot of this transgender agenda that's coming to the schools. So they were very aware of what
so you wrote a letter every year to the new teacher saying, please be aware, we do not want our children exposed to transgender ideology.
Absolutely. And we made it very clear.
Right. And because of your Christian convictions.
Absolutely. And
this is partly why you sent them to a Christian Church of England school.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
Okay.
So we were absolutely shocked to find out that the children had been shown this video, not only without the parents knowing, but also directly against our family's consent. And the way the school did it is that they have a media feed, and it was put on that, but it wasn't a case of, this is what we're going to show the children. This is it. The way it came up was, this is what we already have shown them, and it was the sort of thing that you could easily miss, and we actually did miss it. And the only reason we found out that the children were showing this was because another horrified parent alerted us to the fact that it had been shown.
What do you mean a media feed? I'm trying to understand that. Just explain that. Can you explain that a little bit?
It's called a dojo, and I think a few other schools have them, but
right.
It's basically something that you can log on to as a parent, and it basically shows them what they've been doing. Today we did this, today we learned about
rivers. Okay. So it's sort of but you have to sort of log on in order to see what it says.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
right. So there's no notification sent to parents saying we're going to teach this or we have taught that. It's just part of the routine on this system. You could log in, and if you happen to log in at the right time, you could see that they showed this video.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Okay. And you didn't happen to log at the right time, but somebody else, another concerned parent, did. Yeah. And then presumably messaged a few other parents to say, gosh, look at this.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Okay. So and what was in the content of this video?
So the video is pretty extreme, really. This wasn't a video which just said, there are some people that are different from us, and there's different families. This was an ideology which was being shown, and this video was pretty extreme. It says that children can be born in the wrong body, and the children as young as 3 can change their gender and be non-binary, and that the medical professionals at birth just guess their age, and gender is something that is fluid, basically.
So let's just pause there a minute. So they're showing a video, and I've seen the video, and I think we can probably post a link to it up. It's on YouTube. it's of somebody reading out a book aimed at young children, which has these extraordinary statements like a 3-year-old can change their gender. When a 3-year-old, and like, you know, the doctors guess your gender when you're born. And, you know, I think we've got a few images of the book to show. Can we just maybe show one of these? Here's one page from the book. When people guess wrong, it's okay to let them know. Ruthie was 5 when she told her parents, and a speech bubble saying, I know you think I'm a boy, but really I feel like a girl. And the next page, oops, Ruthie was a girl all along. I just didn't know it at first. So that is saying a 5-year-old can, having been born a boy, somehow realize they're actually a girl. We've got another page. Here's another page. She's a transgender girl. That means when she was born, everyone thought she was a boy until she grew a little older, old enough to tell everyone she's actually a girl. And in that case, that's a 5-year-old. Here's another page. See, when you were born, you couldn't tell people who you were or how you felt. Picture of a baby. They looked at you and made a guess. Maybe they got it right. Maybe they got it wrong. What a thing to say to young children. Maybe they got it right. Maybe they got it wrong about your gender. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing to say to young children. Really it is, isn't it? I mean, Calvin, how did you feel about that?
Well, just so people know, so they can find the video themselves. It's called "It Feels Good to Be Yourself."
Yeah,
that's the name of the video if people want to YouTube it. But yeah, when we viewed the video ourselves, we were really horrified. We felt physically sick. Just can't believe that this was shown to our little girls, and also directly against our consent, and in the Church of England school. You know, having chose that school for the very reason because we wanted a level of protection, and then to find out that the school is pushing this stuff was really, really shocking, and it's been a huge wake-up call for us as parents.
right. And what did you do in response to that? How did your children respond to it, by the way?
It was really confusing for our children because we had to sit them down and say, look, you know, this video is not right. And
right.
there will, you know, why have our teachers shown this video? And it's been a real pain because we've had to have conversations with them, which we really didn't want to have with them at this age.
Of course, yeah, I know you don't have this like that, yeah.
And it's also ruined that teacher and pupil trust now, because I've had to teach them that actually your teachers haven't necessarily always got your best interests at heart, which is a real shame to be able to say to your teacher. I've now had to sort of coach my children into recognizing truth from lies, and that's something that you really don't want to be having to do at this age.
No, ideally you want to say trust adults, or trust the people in your school and so on. I agree. Yeah, it's very disturbing. Roger, can schools just go ahead and promote this kind of stuff to young children like that? Is it no problem? Is there any issues here? What is their position legally and in terms of guidance and so on from schools showing this kind of stuff or teaching this kind of thing?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I have a daughter who's almost 3 and she could barely change her socks, never mind gender. So it's quite remarkable. I think the thing about education law is we were all kids once upon a time. We all went through school and we know how impressionable we were at the school. Now, we didn't see the teachers as parents, but we saw them as authority figures. We did what they said when they taught us. We believed what they taught us was true. And when you're a primary age child, your reliance on what the teacher says as a source of knowledge is huge. And you have a developing brain, you have neuroplasticity. So when this stuff is embedded in your head at that age, it sticks and it becomes a new moral code. So what the law says is, first of all, schools must respect, and that includes individual teachers, the ability of parents to raise their kids according to their own religious and philosophical beliefs. That includes the right not to believe. So when a school is pervasively teaching this kind of gender identity belief, that's a philosophy, and you have a right for your child not to believe in that philosophy. But when it's being taught in the way that it's being taught at this particular school, that is a breach of parental rights under the Human Rights Act. More than that, there is
especially since Calvin's already said to the school,
yeah.
we don't want our children exposed to this kind of philosophy, basically.
Yeah, and there's a lot of confusion that schools go through because you have this idea that there's gender identity belief, and you have the protected characteristic of gender reassignment in the equality law. And what things are often said by local authorities, by the Church of England themselves, that they have to teach this stuff because it's part of the Equality Act. And the reality is that is not true. An 8-year-old can't be trans, not by the definition in the Equality Act, and there's no obligation to teach kids that they can be. Social transitioning, the idea that I'm born in the wrong body, that is not gender reassignment as defined in the Equality Act. There's guidance from the Department for Education, which says that when you teach these harmful stereotypes, you are breaching the law, that these are safeguarding issues, and really there's no place for it in a primary school.
So they're going against government guidance, is what you're saying.
Absolutely,
there. Yeah. I'm just interested. There's a comment here. By the way, if you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, you can see your comments. There's a comment here from NEA. Says, I'm teaching pre-K 3 to 4-year-olds. I live in Budapest. We are so very blessed. This kind of ideology is not permitted in Hungary. This topic is up to parents when they like to discuss sex education. Thank you for sharing that. And it's great that it is not allowed in Hungary. So, Calvin, what did you do? How did you respond in terms of interacting with the school on this then when you found this out?
So we went and had a meeting with the head teacher.
Right.
And she said that she felt sorry that the video had been shown, but it was almost a case of, we're sorry we've been caught out in a way. It wasn't really a heartfelt apology.
Right.
But our main problem was that she gave she didn't really make us feel that this wouldn't happen again. It was, and really the headmistress's whole focus was basically to shut us down rather than to work with us. And she basically said, look, you can take it up with the governors and so on, but she said we're perfectly within our rights, we're following the Church of England's guidelines, and but told us that we're not being inclusive and not being loving.
They said they're following Church of England guidelines in presenting that video, saying that children can change gender, and 3-year-olds, and they guess what sex you are, and they said they claim they're following church guidance on that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Is that right, Roger? Are they following Church of England guidance?
Yes and no. The reality is, Church of England has published this document called "Valuing All God's Children," which purports to be a biblical document supporting loving thy neighbor, etc., aimed at fighting homophobic and bullying. What it really is at its core is an affirmation of gender identity belief and an affirmation that all sexual behavior is acceptable, that we should love kids however they are. Not only should we love them, which we should love them, we should affirm them in whatever behavior they choose to take on. So that's not only unbiblical
or identity, I affirm them in the identity rather than the behavior, I think, Roger.
The identity, but with the identity comes the behavior. So when you're affirming the identity, you're affirming the behavior in a sense, because they're indissociable. I mean, you can't say we affirm you in this, but don't do that, which is the biblical position in a sense that we love our
behavior would include like stealing or hitting. They're not saying affirm any behavior.
Yeah, no, of course they're not. Of course they're not. No. But yeah, but what they're doing is they're emboldening these schools to act as they are in this case. So when a school runs afoul of really what the law says, they can say, well, the Church of England, they've got this guidance and they've got our back on this, and we got to do what they say. And that's exactly what's happened, not just in this school, across the nation.
Yes, it's shocking, isn't it? So what did you do after that then, Calvin, in terms of trying to interact with the school and others about this?
So really, from that point on, we there was a bit of a story behind it, but basically on that media feed that we saw the video being presented, my wife left a comment saying that she was not pleased about it, and they actually deplatformed her. So they shut her down.
Wow.
So they then started to basically cover up the fact that they'd shown this video. So we then printed out some leaflets, and it was very simple. We just said, are you aware that St Michael's School is teaching this trans ideology without parents' consent or knowledge? And we handed them out to parents at the gate. And many parents said, thank you so much. We didn't have any idea that this was going on in the school. And then the next day was parents' evening. So a lot of parents were furious and were really in uproar about the whole thing, which was great to see secular parents with such a big heart.
So I was going to ask about the reaction of other parents. So you felt very strongly supported by the parents, have you? And lots of other parents share your concerns for their young children being told you might have been wrongly assigned the gender at birth or whatever. They only guessed. They only guessed what your gender is. They just made a guess, a random guess, whether you're a boy or a girl. That was it.
Yeah.
Crazy.
No, many parents have sided with us, and they're very, they're absolutely furious. And one of our main sort of allies is a secular family who have seen, I don't know if it's a grandchild, but it's one of their relations has gone through gender reassignment surgery, come out the other side, and now has huge regret. And so they've seen the effects within their family, and they've said to us, you've got to fight this all the way, because they've seen the damage that affirming children in this does. But our first thing really was to get in contact with Christian Concern, and you guys have been great all the way through. You've been absolutely fantastic, and all I would say is to any Christians that are listening, please donate to them, because you never know when you're going to need Christian Concern, and they've been marvelous. They've been fantastic, and thank God for Christian Concern.
Well, thank you. I didn't pay you or prompt you to say that, so thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. Listen, we've got a little question here from Sarah Walker on Facebook, who says, who in the Christian world is challenging Justin Welby on his position on this? He remains silent so often, or is a supporter of these ideologies. How? Question mark. Roger, we have done that, haven't we? We launched a petition and got 15,000 supporters to sign a petition asking to Justin Welby specifically, saying you should withdraw this guidance, this Finding All God's Children guidance for schools. And do you know what the response has been to that, Roger?
Silence, largely silence. They're ensconced in their position. They've responded to a letter from Calvin, I know, which was a non-answer. They didn't answer any of his substantive points. So we just need to keep on putting public pressure on, because as Calvin pointed out, this is serious. This isn't just some teaching that is in one ear and one out the other. These affect kids. We have a contagion in schools where kids are convinced that they're born in the wrong body, and then they go to gender identity clinics. Their puberty is suppressed. They take further steps. There are cases of regret, and then there's no road back to a full healthy recovery. In some cases, you can't have kids of your own again. There's serious consequences to this type of teaching, especially when you embed it in minds this young. And I want to speak to another point, which Calvin addressed, and that's his children's school. Schools have an obligation to consult parents on what will be in their RSE policy. They need to be transparent about that. The material needs to be age appropriate. So first of all, not only was the material clearly age inappropriate, but if parents, and this means the majority of the parents, because clearly most of them had no idea what was going on, if they don't have an idea that this type of material is being taught in the school, and there has been a serious failure on the part of the school to be transparent about what's in their RSE curriculum. And that also could be a legal issue for the school to face in the future.
Wow. So I know that we've been supporting some other clients with a similar issue, Nigel and Sally Rowe, in a Church of England school, and they had slightly different. They had in a 6-year-old class a child who was sometimes wanting to identify in the opposite gender, and the pupils were all told you must call him her, whichever way around it was, on the days when he comes in a dress or dressed up as a girl. And in other words, you must lie about who he is. And effectively, therefore, showing all the children you can just change your gender at will. And they obviously complained about that. And anyway, there's a whole lot more one could say about that case. But they recently wrote again to the Archbishop of Canterbury about this and asking to withdraw the Value August Children Guidance. And the Archbishop did actually finally reply and supported that guidance. So he has actually supported that guidance and stood by it. In that context, which is so. In other words, no willingness to show any remorse or any need to change or any possible changes that might happen here, which is very disappointing. And Calvin, you wrote yourself, didn't you, to the Chief Executive Education, Nigel Genders, Chief Education Officer of the Church of England, about this. Tell us about that.
Yeah, quite a disappointing response, really. He, instead of looking at the guidelines, and seeing how they can be improved upon, he's doubled down and stood by them. And his argument is that he's saying that trans pupils do exist, and that this is a real thing, and that's not what we were getting at. We were saying it's your guidelines and the way they're worded which is being mistaken by teachers, that because the way it's written, if you have a look at the Value and All God's Children guidelines, when you read it, it is affirming trans children. There's no way to get around it. And he's not come out and said that he condemns this in a public way. He's standing by them, and for that, that's a real problem, because the schools are they're either using this to promote this ideology, or they're misunderstanding what he means and then teaching this ideology. But it's a strange thing, really, because the Church of England have blamed the school, saying that that's not what they quite meant, and then the school are blaming the Church of England, saying, well, yeah, that is what you meant, because we're following the guidelines. So no one's taking.
So if I remember correctly, Calvin, you got a letter from the head mistress, and the letter actually quoted a statement from Nigel Genders in order to defend promoting extreme ideology, transgender ideology in the Church of England primary school. And you wrote to Nigel Genders and said to him, do you realize your own words, your own statement is being used by my school to defend promoting transgender ideology? And he responded saying, well, that wasn't my intention. Let me look into it, kind of thing. But he's never written to the school and explained that. He's never gone out publicly and said, oh, I didn't really mean that. He's not withdrawn the statement, knowing that this is how it's being used. Either he's being disingenuous, or he's just not bothered, or he's I can't understand his motivation. I can't understand. I mean, he's not interested in protecting children from this kind of transgender. He says this is not what I intended, but he's not actually doing anything about it. He's prepared to leave statements up there, leave guidance and documents up there that he knows are being used to defend showing transgender ideology in schools, and he's not prepared to do anything about it other than say in a private letter to you, that's not really what I meant, but it's kind of this, that's up to the school. Well, it's up to him. He's the Chief Education Officer of the Church of England, right? He can say, no, you're not supposed to do this, but he's not prepared to do that, is he?
No. And I think that, this case is such a good example of how that these guidelines have failed. It's so obvious that that this is going to happen again if these guidelines don't get changed. And really, it's such a weak response. The church should be a beacon for the community, and they should be, shepherding Parliament. They should be showing us all the way to live and telling society, biblically, how we should be. But instead, we're seeing them being led by society, and it's completely backwards.
Yeah. And
I was going to say, it's interesting that as an organization that's been doing this since the Nigel and Sally case, that was really the first major public case that dealt with this issue. We've kind of been at the forefront of this, and we've got a tremendous amount of parents who have contacted us exactly on this same issue. And interestingly, I would say that the ratio of Church of England versus secular schools where this is happening is 2-to-1. That there's many more Church of England schools where we get complaints about than secular schools.
Wow.
And I recall even a secular school coming back to us. We had a Christian parent who was complaining. They quoted Valuing All God's Children, saying, "Well, I mean, you're Christians, but so is the Church of England, and they're promoting this." So
Wow.
this is dangerous across the board, even for secular schools to be using it as weaponizing it against parental rights.
Unbelievable. So we've got a question here from Sarah Walker on Facebook. Question for you, Roger. I think. Well, as a reply to another comment, it says, "My understanding is that private Christian schools have to follow this guidance too, not voluntary. Is that correct?" Replying to Lillian Sedils.
Well, the question would be, which guidance are we speaking about?
I presume she means the Valuing All God's Children guidance.
No, that's not statutory guidance. You don't have to follow it. It's just you don't even have to. There's no legal obligation to give due regard to it. Absolutely not. The DFE guidance, on the other hand, is something.
It's actually government RSC guidance. Is that what was being meant? Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean that's a bit more complicated because that is statutory guidance. But there's a difference between. It's very semantic and it's very tricky and it's unfair for schools to have to unpack it themselves. But there's a difference between when they say schools must teach this versus schools should teach this. So when they say schools should teach this, a lot of schools are saying, well, that means we must teach it, and that's not the case. They're going beyond what the statute says must be taught, and gender identity belief is precisely one of the things that's in there that they say should be taught, which isn't in the RSC statute itself. Is something that must be taught.
What do they say? It should be taught to primary schools. What do they say?
Not at primary schools. That during the course of education, meaning from primary school through secondary school, this should be taught at some point.
Right. So they're not saying it should.
That's the RSC guidance. That shouldn't be confused with the further guidance it provided, saying you need to be incredibly careful with this stuff because it's ideological and it gets misrepresented very easily.
Yes, and you shouldn't have organizations come in that only present a pro-transgender approach.
Yeah,
is what the guidance says from memory. Yeah,
correct.
So and Roger, what about this concept of quote trans pupils, which the Church of England guidance, back to that again, Valuing All God's Children, affirms the existence of trans pupils even in primary schools. What would you say to that?
I'd say that the law doesn't say that. The law doesn't even come close to saying that. There was a decision from the EAT, the Employment Appeal Tribunal. Actually, there's been, this was the Maya Forrester case, I believe, and it was reaffirmed in one of our cases, which said that the vast majority of people, not the vast majority, but a huge proportion of people who identify as trans aren't in fact trans in the legal sense. So to become trans under the legal sense, you have to make a lifelong commitment to living out as the opposite gender and take some steps towards that. The case law has said that kids under the age of 16 don't have that capacity. They're not Gillick competent to do so. So there is no such thing in that sense as a trans pupil. There's no obligation to socially transition a child because they're not gender reassigned in the meaning of the Equality Act. They certainly can't get a gender recognition certificate and be legally recognized as trans. So this is a fiction that's been created by activists, which has been upheld by the Church of England.
Yes, and when you get to primary school children, it's even more ridiculous, isn't it? And even more absurd.
It's much more dangerous, certainly, because there's no critical thinking at that age.
Yes, exactly, precisely. Yeah. So, Calvin, where do you go from here with this? So, what's your advice to parents at this point on, having been through this experience?
Well, I think it's clear now that we can't trust the Church of England to look after our children's safety when it comes to these sorts of issues. They've really let us down, and not just let us down. When we have approached them, there's been no apology. It's been, if anything, they've just confirmed their position is okay, and and they're, I think this is only going to get worse. They've really the Church of England have got to return back to the Bible, and if they don't, they're going to be on a downward spiral. But for parents, I would say we've all got to make a stand, and now is the time to do it. I think for too long we've all sort of sat back and watched this come through, and we've all been quite lazy, and we sort of hide behind this whole peace and love idea, which is good, but now it's time to stand up and to really to be separated from the world, not to go and live as a monk out in the middle of Alaska or something, but we have to have a clear distinction between our lives, which are based on the word of God, and the world, because it's now becoming so separated. The secular society is pushing more and more boundaries out of the way, and this is only going to get worse as time goes on, and we've got to stand out from the crowd. And I think woe to us if we don't.
Very good, very good. And thank you for doing exactly that and standing up and showing people and raising the profile of this issue. And Roger, what would your advice to parents be?
I would say that it's naive to think that schools are what they were when we were kids.
Right.
And when we were kids, schools were safe places. Now they're ideological places. And, one of the viewers pointed out that this isn't taught in Hungary. I'm currently in Slovakia. There's no relationships education or LGBT education in Slovakia. In Northern Ireland, in fact, the concept of gender reassignment isn't introduced in education whatsoever. So it doesn't have to be this way. The law can be changed, and we need to stand up and demand a change of law, saying, look, schools across the country are hurting children. This is a very serious issue. We are hurting the next generation, and it's a great disservice to the nation, and it needs to stop. And I think only parents can do that at this point. We need a groundswell of parents, the grassroots level, to do this.
Absolutely. Well, Calvin, listen, well done for what you've done. Fantastic, really brave. Great that you've also sort of informed lots of other parents in your school and got them to complain as well, and got the support from that. It's very encouraging to hear about the support from other parents for you standing up and being brave about this, and for raising the profile of the issue generally and challenging the Church of England and putting them on the spot about it. Really appreciate you doing that. Hope we have more parents like you. And if you're watching and you're a parent, do check out what's happening in your schools and be very, very wary of what teachers are sometimes teaching about this kind of thing, and do raise complaints to issues and call us up if you want any help as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for watching or listening. If you've done that, and we will look forward to seeing you again next week. Do follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and other channels, and look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.